much, Megan, and welcome everyone. Very exciting presentation today. So we're very lucky to have Dr. Laura Foglia. Laura is a vice president at Larry Walker and Associates, working on projects in the areas of hydrologic modeling, groundwater management assistance, and managed aquifer recharge. Since 2016, she's also adjunct faculty at UC Davis in the Land, Air, and Water Resources Department, where I had the pleasure of interacting with Laura academically. She holds a master's in physics from the University of Milan and a PhD in environmental engineering from ETH Zurich, which is a fabulous school. Her colleague joining her is Kelsey McNeill. Kelsey is a project engineer at Larry Walker and Associates, working in some of those same areas of groundwater management, and Kelsey holds a master's degree in environmental engineering from the University of California, Berkeley. Today's presentation is going to be managed aquifer recharge in the Scott Valley, exploring benefits of winter recharge to increase in-stream flows. I had the distinct pleasure of actually working with Laura and Kelsey on some of this, so it's near and dear to my heart, and I am just excited because it's a really cool project. As Megan mentioned, if you have questions during the presentation, Laura and Kelsey don't mind being interrupted, so feel free to put them in the chat and I will interrupt them and probably ask them, or raise your hand just using that react button, and I will try to monitor that and also interrupt them. And without further ado, give a little snap or a clap for our hosts here, and I'm going to kick it to them and put myself on mute.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, so I can share my screen and get going. There is so much to discuss about this project, so let's see if we can make it happen in the time. I'm sure we can. Okay, so we are going to present you the experiment that we are doing in Scott Valley since quite a bit of time, and I'll give you the way we will present it. We really want to give you the idea of the history of the project, so what happened over many years. So you know already who we are, and history in Scott Valley. I just want to point out, I started working in Scott Valley in 2011 when I was a postdoc with Thomas Harter. Thomas actually started working in Scott Valley in 2007. So then in 2018, we started supporting Siskiyou County and Scott Valley for the groundwater sustainability plan development. So we have a really long history of UC Davis and LWA working up in Scott. So we go through the project overview. Where is this place? Not all of you might be very familiar with Northern California. What's the history? And then we really want to show you some of the cool and interesting data collection that we are doing, just to show that maybe we have to keep moving forward with more of these managed aquifer recharge projects. So Scott Valley is very up there, very Northern California. It's an alluvium groundwater basin that was considered in the Bulletin 118 a medium priority basin. So they were required to develop a groundwater sustainability plan. The groundwater sustainability plan was submitted in December 2021, and then it was approved in April 2023. Obviously, it was a big step for the community up there, and why it's important to mention the groundwater sustainability plan is because, I will show you later in the presentation, the project that we are talking about is a big component of the project and management actions that we have in our groundwater sustainability plan. So it's all very interconnected. To add complexity to the area, the Scott River is one of the key tributaries to the Klamath River. And you probably are all familiar with what's happening on the Klamath River, and the environment up there is kind of tricky at the moment. So the Scott River is definitely an important habitat for several species of anadromous fish, including the coho salmon. So that's why we are looking into eventually enhancing some of the stream flow, but trying to be very protective with these managed aquifer recharge projects. So why the recharge in Scott Valley? So this is a beautiful picture of the Scott River. So the idea is really during periods of high flows, mostly in the winter, we would like to take this water from the Scott River, apply it to fields, and see if this increases groundwater availability for later in the season when at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, we see that levels are significantly going down. So it's really the key question in Scott Valley are really all around groundwater surface water interaction. The river goes dry sometimes. We need to figure out what's the in-stream flows that are really needed for fish to be able to come up into the valley, and really what it's how can we really make this balancing act between what's needed for the community up there, what's needed for the fish, what's the best option for everybody. And one of the really cool things about this project is that there was no money invested for infrastructure. We were just using an existing infrastructure, an existing irrigation ditch, which is the Scott Valley irrigation ditch. And so basically, in terms of, let's say, money investment, it was just all around data collection, which definitely made things so much much more appealing than thinking about having millions of dollars in infrastructures. And this gives you kind of a sense of why, but then if we connect this to groundwater sustainability plan, what we did in the groundwater sustainability plan, we look into modeling scenarios that are really supporting the potential of groundwater recharge as one of the tools for reaching the sustainability. So what we did in the plan is kind of a probably unique approach to interconnected surface water. But basically we said conditions in 2015 were already undesirable results. So what we need to do is reduce the depletion, or the way we called it was reverse the depletion. So we ran scenarios, and the metric that we were using was a percentage of a relative depletion reversal. And when is this reversal really needed? It's mostly between September and November, because those are the months when the fish would like to come up into the valley, and sometimes the Scott River is still dry, the fish cannot come in, and so there are a series of barriers for fish to really get to where they want to go. So what we did is for scenario type that look into enhanced recharge, we looked at managed aquifer recharge, what we called in lieu recharge, which is mostly using surface water for as much as possible in the early growing season, and then a combination of managed aquifer recharge and in lieu recharge. And then if you look at this column on the right, we kind of calculated how much was the depletion reversal based on these different scenarios, and also looking at kind of a combination of managed aquifer recharge and in lieu. And what we came up with was if we do managed aquifer recharge and in lieu, and I'll show you later how, we may get a 19% reversal of the current depletion. So we decided that this seemed to be like a very achievable goal, and we just started from there. How we did it? Basically, we looked throughout the valley and we look at all the fields where either managed aquifer recharge or in lieu recharge can happen. And then these fields were included in our model, and they were used to simulate different conditions based on different amount of recharge, different timing. You know, you can decide if you want to apply the water between January and March on the yellow field, and then on the red fields, there was the option was to apply surface water instead of groundwater in April, May, so at the beginning of the season. But the model gave us some flexibility on how to look at the different fields and the different management that could happen in the different fields. So ideally, in the fields that now are yellow and orange, is we were able to actually make this project happen for real. So this is model results. The project that Kelsey and I will be talking about is what happened in reality. And it's really, we will show you will see in the maps that we have later that the fields that are orange and yellow are the ones where we were able to do it concretely last winter. I will not go through too much through this. I think it's in our GSP and in all the presentation that we have done for the GSP advisory committees. But basically what we were doing with the model, if we take the plot on the right, basically we are looking at running model scenarios with for a dry, for example, average and a wet year, and do the base case scenario, and then a scenario that looks into the potential for this managed aquifer recharge and indoor recharge scenarios. And then what we are really looking at is like the blue box here that tells us what's our opportunity for really changing the depletion of our system, which is mostly the depletion on the river. But anyway, this is just to give you some introduction, and then I'll tell you a little bit more on how the project is really working on and what we did so far. So, as I said, we are using an existing infrastructure. So the existing infrastructure is this yellowish or brownish line here, which is the Scott Valley irrigation ditch. And you can see it all goes along the eastern side of the valley, and it just uses gravity. So that's really the appealing component. There is nothing that we don't need any pump there. What happens is at the point of diversion, there is a small dam, and dam allows for the water to enter there into the irrigation ditch. Right now, in the permit that we have, and we always looked at, we are looking into diverting in the period of January through March. And actually, our goal is really to see on the long term if this recharge project is going to benefit the system enough to really justify keeping going with this project. And what we want to see is the water that eventually gets applied to field in the wintertime, reaching the river later in the season when the river really needs that extra water, which is September, October, November, depending really on the conditions. So our goal is really to see if whatever we do in the winter can have a benefit in the late summer and fall. So the project has a long history, but you will see that basically it was a lot of trial and error. And actually, we really didn't get it down to something that made any difference till this past winter, 2024. So 2016, it was a pilot project, mostly done by UC Davis. And the idea was really to see, at that time, the main question was still like, okay, what's the impact on eventually applying this extra water on alfalfa fields? Because I forgot to say that most of these recharge is happening on alfalfa fields. Some are pasture. There are a few that are not really, don't really have anything growing. But the biggest concern was trying to understand the potential impact on alfalfa. So in 2016, it was a sort of a pilot project. And 675 acre-foot were diverted, and the diversion report was submitted in October 2016. So UC Davis and Scott Valley Irrigation District, they received the permit from the temporary permit, the 180 days permit by the State Water Board, and then just use it to test it for that specific year. Then there was a gap and nothing really happened for some time, but then probably thanks to all the driving forces coming through working on the GSP and the project management action there, we really wanted to revamp this project. So in 2022, we reapplied for the permit. Unfortunately, there were a lot of issues with the requirements in the application, mostly regarding monitoring, and we got the permit in March 3rd, 2022, and that basically gave us the opportunity to divert barely 28.6 acre-feet of water to test the recharge. It was too late. The river was not running high enough, and so we could not divert much water. In 2023, we got the permit earlier, so we were kind of ironing out our process with the State Water Board. So you see it, we went from March 3rd to January 18, and January 18 eventually would be a good time, but the river was really not running much. And also what happened in that year is that March was going to be a good time to divert water, but unfortunately, because of limitation on stock water diversion due to emergency regulation, the ditch was completely dry for January and February. And by the time we started diverting water on March 13, basically it took more than a week for the water to just travel from the point of diversion to the first point of use, because the ditch is leaking, which is good for what we want to do, but it really took time to re-wet everything. So we managed to divert 816 acre-feet, and we submitted then our report to the State Water Board in May. And then in 2024, as I said, we were ironing out our process, and the permit was issued in 21st of November 2023. So we were ready to go for whenever the water was available in the river. So recharge started on January 15 and went through all the way through March 31st, and we diverted 2,539 acre-feet of water. So quick summary of the different steps. As I said, in 2016, it was mostly an on-farm pilot. It was on 15 acres. And if somebody's interested, I will not go into the detail, but there is a paper by my colleague Helen Dalkey, which was also one of those recognized with the award earlier today. And you can read all the details about the experiment on alfalfa. The conclusion from 2016 was that it looks like what was really promising for us is mostly this conclusion that over 90% of the applied water seemed to be going into deep percolation, which is really what we want. So the water was not going directly back into the river. So 2017, as I said, after 2016, we had a moment of like rethinking. So 2017, actually, the permit was withdrawn. 2022, we mostly did instrumentation tests. So we really used 2022 to design all the data collection that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, together with the State Water Board, was asking us. And we really started all the sampling for see if we could get a good characterization of baseline conditions. So 2023 was limited, but it really gave us some good time for understanding the system. I mean, even this idea that the ditch was dry prior to start of the recharge and how much of a delay that caused into the recharge for getting it into the fields. And it was really useful to kind of see what's happening and how this ditch is really transporting the water. So now let's get to the interesting component, which is the SVID recharge in 2024. So as I said, it was a much better year. We were able to start diverting in January 15, and we managed to use 10 different locations that are the fields in light blue here. As you can see, the fields are, we try to get fields that are not too close to the Scott River, but it really depends. Sometimes it's just, we wanted to try all what we had available. The total area was 260 acres. So it really kind of expanding a lot in this, it expanded a lot in the past year. So our, what is our requirements for getting the diversion started? So we put together an 180 days temporary permit with the State Water Board, which is not based on the, I think maybe some of you are familiar with the 90-20 rule. So we are not looking at the river being above the 90th percentile, but we did an extended study to basically come up with a number, which is 440 CFS at the gauge at the exit of the valley, which is a USGS gauge, which is called Fort Jones gauge. So we demonstrated that using 440 was a protective measure, and then Jason and ESA, they helped us really justify even more that this was a good approach. So basically, the red line is the 440 CFS, which is the requirement for the Fort Jones gauge, and the blue is the flow. So you see that basically January 13 is when the river flow started going up, and then January 15 is when our project started, and we were always above the red line, so we were able to divert all the way. Diversion did not happen right away at full speed. We really increased the amount of water recharged day by day. We needed to see that everything was working out. We needed to see that nobody was getting flooded. So we were very careful on ramping up the project slowly. And what is important is that really we had not been able to do it at this scale earlier. So this was really the first year. That's why we needed to be very careful. So quick timeline of 2024, we started diverting in January 15, and we started applying to one field, which was the field B, then February 9, field C, February 16, we started with field D, and then all the others just followed. And so what about the data collection, which I think probably is the most interesting component of the project right now? Because what we want to do now, okay, we did this recharge. How do we demonstrate that this recharge was a good thing to do? And how do we move forward and keep doing it over the next years? So we installed right away 9 groundwater wells where we have level and temperature, and they are all connected through telemetry, so we get data every day. We have 2 flow stations on the Scott River. One is basically at the point of diversion, and one is just below the point of diversion. And this was one of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife requirements. And then we have 5 flow stations along the ditch. And these flow stations along the ditch, they help us understanding how much water is really going through the ditch. And then I'll pass it on Kelsey for the geochemistry.
Yeah, so over the past year or so, we had collected some rounds of isotope samples prior to that, but over the past year, we've started collecting more geochemical samples. And before I get into this too much, I think Audra and Ben from Larry Walker Associates are also on the phone. and did a lot of this analysis. So if there are questions, we have some great resources to get some answers. So isotopes is one of the things we collected, which are forms of the same element. So they have the same number of protons, but with different numbers of neutrons. And these different number of neutrons means that there's mass differences, which result in fractionation. So there's an uneven distribution of these isotopes throughout the water cycle. And we take a look at, like the figure on the right, hydrogen and oxygen isotopes. And then we also have been sampling for radon, which is a naturally occurring radioactive noble gas, has a short half-life, and it's used as a tracer for identifying groundwater rich or poor waters. So we use it primarily for looking at where groundwater is discharging to surface water. And then next slide. So what information are we trying to get out of this sample collection? For water isotopes, we're trying to distinguish different water sources or identify mixing of these sources. And radon, we're primarily looking at trying to identify gaining and losing areas. So both in location, but also over time, as you'll see, this changes seasonally. And we use kind of the water isotopes, radon, sensor measurements, groundwater level measurements all together to help gain a picture and understand stream flow dynamics over time. And we found that looking at time series are the most valuable way to look at this data. That's where we've gotten the most information. And next slide. So this is just a graphic to show radon activity and gaining and losing streams. So you'll see on the left where there's high radon activity, it's indicative of groundwater influx, indicating it's a gaining stream. And that's sample collection from the river, from the surface water. And next slide. So one of our permit terms that we've worked through with CDFW is this biological monitoring plan. And we do this in partnership with Scott River Water Trust. And essentially a field staff goes out in person every day that we're actively diverting for groundwater recharge. And he walks 100 feet above and below the point of diversion at Young's Dam. And he's basically just doing a visual check and making sure that there's no fish being harmed by this operation.
Thank you, Kelsey. Okay, so I can go back into some of the details and some preliminary results that I have to say really preliminary, because a lot of like the geochemistry numbers came back from the lab, something like last week or something like that. And also with the groundwater wells, we are continuously updating and doing quality control. So as I said earlier, we diverted 2539 acre-feet of water from the Scott River, and 1,774 were applied to the 10 fields. The difference is what has been just lost through the Scott Valley irrigation ditch operation, which is, anyway, it's a form of recharge in itself. Oops. Okay, so we started looking into responses of wells to the recharge. So we just picked a few, like these wells number 794 down here. You see the recharge started in March 15. And you see the answer of the well that seems to be at some point is kind of leveling out, which is expected. The well is also pretty close to the river, so for sure it has it's more like balancing out. I would show you that there were no very significant precipitation at that time, so we had some little rain here and there, but no big storms. And then this is, for example, 788, which is farther from the river. So this type of behavior, a little bit less up and down, is expected. But there is clearly a signal that is showing that the groundwater elevation is going up. And this is another one. It's 888. This is again closer to the river, so it has a behavior that is different from 788. And I think it was just interesting to start looking at all these responses and try to understand how everything is is reacting within the system. But then let's go through the area where we did the recharge for the longest time, which is also the place where the first 2016 experiment was carried out. And so this is field B. And in field B, we have these transects of free wells that go from the field closer to the river. So ideally, what we want to see is the well where really close to the recharge application should really respond to the application, but we don't want to see the well close to the river responding right away, because the goal of this project is really to see if the water can stay in the system until later in the fall. So our goal was really just to say, start saying right away that the water maybe is not going directly right into the river, but it's flowing somewhere up, and then it's going to contribute to the river later. So these are this is the transect. The orange is the field where most of the recharge happened, and the blue is the flow station, and which is also the point of diversion from the ditch. And this is what happened. So the green hydrograph up here is telling us how much recharge was applied every day to that specific field. You know, there is some variation also because at some point we started, when this field was really full of water, we started applying to other fields. And then the plot on the bottom is showing groundwater elevation in the free wells in the transect that I showed earlier. But let me go through to this next one, because I really I feel like having also the river is very interesting. So purple line is the well really close to the application. And this well basically responded by, I don't remember, it's 14, 15 feet. So it took some time, but it really went up there. The green well is the one in the middle, and it had some response later, but it's a few feet, so the response was not immediate. And the yellow well is the one closer to the river, so it's expected that it goes a little bit more up and down because it follows a little bit the river behavior. So, but the yellow well is not the one that really responded right away. What is interesting is the river stage, which is the light blue here, which is measured really at the same location next to the 201 well. And you see that basically the system is going from gaining to losing to gaining. So the river was losing at the beginning of the experiment, but then by the time we ended the experiment, all the wells where groundwater elevation was above the river elevation, which means if we think in terms of modeling results, the groundwater is contributing into the river. And we then decided to look into the entire set of data that we have. So we created these contour maps really to see to demonstrate basically what I was just saying in terms of the river going from losing to gaining. And the way our contours are shaped, it's really telling us that after the recharge, using all the wells that we have, so all the continuous data that we have, which are the blue triangle, the river is really going into a gaining condition for both the east and the west side. You see the west side of the valley, it's always pretty much a gaining condition, but the east side is where things are a little bit less clear. And so this is exactly what we wanted to see. Now, the question that we still have to answer to is how long is going to take for the water that we applied to those specific fields to really make it into the river. And this is why we have all these other experiments that and these other data collection that hopefully will kind of start making things a little bit clear and look at see and make us understanding if this is really a promising experiment. And Kelsey, you can go into the results from isotopes.
Yeah, so this is a look at our isotope results for the post-recharge kind of spring through to the end of August. And we increased the frequency during this time period because this is the period we're really interested in. If you remember from earlier in the presentation, our goal is to look at groundwater recharge impact on augmenting stream flow, and we're really especially focused on this critical summer and fall period when the flows are at their lowest. So taking a look at these results, you can see there's a seasonal shift in the water isotope signature pretty continuously from the spring months throughout the summer months and moving further into the dry period. And what we can kind of infer from this is the shift in water sources contributing to Scott River. And I should mention, it's at the top of the slide, but these samples are all taken from Scott River. So they're all surface water samples from the river. And we can kind of infer that there's a shift in water sources feeding the river from maybe more snowmelt dominated in the early spring to a more evaporatively enriched signature from groundwater or the recharged water in this late summer period. And next slide. So the radon results, we also have a time series similar to the isotope one that shows a similar increase in groundwater contribution to stream flow as we get further into the summer months. But we recently did this push point sample, which I think is kind of interesting. It's water samples taken at different depths below the ground surface. And this graphic just sort of illustrates the gaining versus losing stream dynamic in relation to radon concentrations that we're interested in. And next slide. So this is the results from an August 29th sample, and this SVID 06 is a site on Scott River, and it's adjacent to the recharge fields. And so we're really seeing confirmation of what we're also seeing in the isotope results and the groundwater level. So you see on the y-axis, there's the depth, x-axis is radon concentration, and you see kind of the deeper you move, the more increase there is in radon. And it's just for some context, down to 50 centimeters. So it's not a huge depth, but we are seeing that, what you would expect to see in a gaining stream location. And this photo credit goes to Ben. This is the field setup, just to give you a visualization of what the sample collection looks like. And I think it's back to Laura now.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so now our job now is try to put together all this information that we have and see how they can be used for management. And we already submitted the permit for next year. We're working on a 5-year temporary permit with the State Water Board. So we really hope that this project can move forward. So what we are doing now, and we don't have yet all the model scenarios, but what we have in mind is something like, so our groundwater model for Scott Valley is pretty refined, and it's very well calibrated, and it's being recalibrated now. So it gives us some confidence. So what we are planning to do is to take the base case scenario and then compare the base case scenario with what we call, for example, the managed aquifer recharge scenario, and then look at the flow difference month by month and see where this flow difference happens. So here it's kind of expected the biggest flow difference. This is just an hypothetical example, happens in the downstream part of the river. I forgot to say the Scott River flows south to north, which sometimes I still get confused. So just to keep that in mind. So where we want to see really the biggest improve is really this downstream part of the river in later in the fall. To put things in perspective, we started making these summary. So as I said, this is similar to the table that I showed earlier from the groundwater sustainability plan. And let's say that we take the managed aquifer recharge scenario, which is just January through March. And if we think about the numbers that we had in the plan, which was 13,000 acre feet per year, then if we look at what is the volume of depletion reversal that we would like to have as an average per year, it's 464. The model is running for the GSP was running from 1991 to 2018. That's how we went from the 13,000 down to 464. So far, in 2024, the on-farm recharge that we did was 2,539. And basically, this looks already a much bigger number than the 464. And if we consider that, obviously, there are so many other things happening. So we are not saying that it's a full 1-1 comparison. But it's giving us the opportunity to put things in perspective. And in our plan, we were saying that we don't have a single solution for bringing the system back to sustainability. So it's going to be a lot of smaller effort. But looking at this number, we feel like this is one of the projects that needs to keep being considered and needs to be moving forward for the future. So if we also think about the numbers that were in the pilot study in 2016, where we say that 90% of what gets applied is expected to basically end up in deep percolation. This means that this deep percolation then sooner or later makes it back to the river. So this is making us even more confident about how promising this project is. Obviously, we are really looking forward to have all the model results, some more data collection, and one more year of trial just to see what comes out. But these numbers are helpful. And I have to say, they helped a lot with the stakeholders also, because finally, you work so much to put together a plan, and everything is so nebulous, and it's an abstract. And now they see numbers and they see that they can do things, and obviously that really helps bringing all the stakeholders together. So conclusion, I have to say that we did a lot of we have a really intense network between the groundwater levels, the flows, and the geochemistry. What we would like ideally is to have implementation over multiple years, so we can really see the benefits. We know that in dry winters, probably the river will not get to the 440 CFS that we need, and maybe we will not be able to divert much, but still it's good to know, and it's good to be able to try. And our next step, so we are adding a temperature sensor in the Scott River, and because we feel like the temperature will give us an extra level of information. We also added additional shallow piezometers that hopefully they will help us with the tracking the direction of the water from the application and the point of application toward the river. And then just to wanted to remind everybody, because of the State Water Board permit, we are submitting a diversion report every year that I think everybody can request to the State Water Board. It should be posted somewhere. I think we don't know yet where, but in case, it can be requested to the State Water Board so that then everybody can look at what happened. And in terms of permit, as I said, we already applied for an 180 days permit for 2025, but we are also working toward a 5-year temporary permit that eventually will give us a little bit more room for trying different options. And I think this is the end. So we can open it up for questions. Jason is on you.
Thanks so much, Laura. Great presentation. It's a really great project. It's very cool to see the 2024 results. I just wanted to acknowledge, the work that you and your team are doing up there, and just like how important it is to kind of see those results and the level of instrumentation that you have out there, and that's what it takes to kind of get these proof of concepts. First question in the chat before I open it up to everyone is from Aaron Angel. Just could you share some lessons learned maybe from the permitting process, and what you would recommend to a consultant or an agency or somebody, about trying to get their permits as soon as possible in the season?
So what we learned is that we really need to submit the permit to the State Water Board as soon as possible. I think Kelsey submitted in June this year, just to be sure. So at the beginning, we were waiting until after the summer, which is too late. I think the lesson learned is schedule many meetings with the State Water Board unit for the permit. They are very helpful. And contact your key stakeholders, mostly Fish and Wildlife, have consultation with them way ahead of submitting the permit. Because, for example, in 2022, one of the reasons why we got the permit so late is because there were some last-minute requests on adding instrumentation. So it's better to know in advance. So I think that the lesson learned is it's really like do it as soon as you can, and also when you submit the permit doesn't need to be perfect. It can still be ironed out. So the suggestion from the State Water Board is always to submit as soon as you have something that is kind of almost there, and then comments from stakeholders and everything else can be incorporated into the permit later on. So my sense is now to be sure that your permit is going to be processed on time. I mean, at the latest probably is June, July.
Yeah, okay. Good to know. Second question comes from Daniel Montjoy. Poses, would you expect a delayed multi-year benefit to stream flow? Is there modeling to support that? Seems like, that's the most beneficial way to kind of reverse dry year flows after wet year recharge. And I sort of preliminary responded that I believe you do have some modeling about kind of the additive benefit, but you can certainly speak better to it than I can.
Yeah, so we have something in that that goes into that direction, and that's why we are really now doing all the modeling scenarios. I think we are planning to have all the modeling scenarios ready for when we meet with the advisory committee up there in November. Still, I have to say, because of the nature of the Scott River, I would expect most of the benefits to really happen in the fall of the year when you do the recharge, just because of how the system works.
Yeah.
And I totally understand, and everybody agrees that in dry years we'll not be able to do that much. Maybe there will be a little bit of delayed effect if let's say 1 year is great and the year after is a dry. Maybe there is something. That's exactly why we want to do this project for a little bit longer, because only 1 year it's not telling us the full story.
Yeah, and is that in part, just based on the physics, how close to the river the recharge sites are? It's not a very deep basin, and so the water balance is like kind of more annual almost.
Yeah, it's water comes in the winter, leaves in the summer, then comes back. So it's yeah.
Yeah, but in other basins maybe certainly you'd have that multi-year additive effect, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions from the field for Laura or Kelsey about this project? Got 3 minutes. I don't see anything, and I see that some folks are dropping off, and we only have 2 minutes to go. So, with the absence of Laura or Kelsey wanting to say anything else, I'd just like to say thank you. You know, I think this is a really stupendous project. You know, it's very interesting to me, mostly because the main focus of the project is for fish and wildlife enhancement. So commend you in that regard. And look, you know, I was very excited to see these results because I hadn't seen the full set of 2024 results, so it's awesome. Oh yeah, Christina asks,
Oh yeah,
is the project generally supported locally? And if not, you know, what are the concerns?
I have
So
to say, yeah, I can say very briefly. Yes, Christina, honestly, once we managed to make it happen, and now everybody's on board and feels like this is something that needs to happen more consistently. It's true that it has been a journey because some of the environmental communities at the beginning they were very concerned. This is gonna harm the fish because we are removing water in the winter time. So by the time you demonstrate that actually the amount of water that we divert, it's barely seen by the river, let's say. You know, the river is running maybe 1,000, we divert 30 CFS. You don't really see that as an impact in the river in the winter time. Now that we managed to do it, everybody wants to keep working on it. So it's really kind of, it has been a very interesting community effort.
yeah,
Awesome.
and I'd highlight too that is in no small part due to the work that Laura and Kelsey and the LWA team, you know, and UC Davis have done up in the Scott River watershed, you know, just through a lot of like, you know, outreach and engagement actions. So, you know, you say it as if it's a small thing, but you know, since 2016, many years, lots of meetings, and I know that you both personally have spent a lot of time up in the Scott.
Yeah, we
So
like our Etna house.
yeah, exactly. I hope to get up there someday. I need to do the road
Sure.
trip. Yeah, I want to do the road trip. Anyway, with that, it's 1:30. Thank you everyone again. And be sure to tune in next month for the next presentation from our some more UC Davis colleagues. That should be really interesting. Thanks everyone again. Really appreciate it. And again, thanks to our speakers. So one more little hand clap.
Thank you. Bye, Jason.
Yep, get that water in the ground, Laura. Bye.
Bye.